Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Jackson. Welcome to this afternoon's panel. Really excited to have everybody joining us and to have Frederick, Toni, and Joy along. Edited by Sanel Barnes, the beautiful collection of essays, A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South, released just last week. It's a New York Times new and noteworthy book, a most anticipated book from Bookpage, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Paperback Paris. It's got glowing reviews and features in Garden and Gun magazine and Kirkus Reviews and many other publications. So a little bit about it. This fierce collection celebrates the incredible diversity in the contemporary South with essays by 21 of the finest young writers of color living and working in the region today. They all address a central question: who is welcome? The writers acknowledge that from the DMV to the college basketball court to doctor's offices, there are no shortage of places of tension in the American South. Urgent, timely, funny, and poignant, these essays from new and established writers confront the complexities of the South's relationship with race, uncovering the particular difficulties and profound joys of being a Southerner in the 21st century. We are so honored and lucky to have 3 of the essays with us to share their work and to answer questions for us about their stories. Our reading today is also sponsored in part by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, so thank you very much to our sponsor. I'll tell you a little bit about each of the panelists, and then they'll read excerpts from their wonderful work with us and answer a few of our questions. So please, y'all, ask any questions, and let's dive on in. So first, we have Toni Jensen. She is the author of Carrie, a memoir and essays about gun violence, and a short story collection, From the Hilltop. She's the recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship for 2020. Her essays and stories have been published in Orion, Catapult, and Ecotone. She teaches in the programs in creative writing and translation at the University of Arkansas and in the Low Residency MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. She is a Métis. Next, we'll have Frederick McKindra, fiction writer and essayist who lives in Little Rock, Arkansas. He attended Howard University and holds an MFA in fiction from the New School. His essay, Becoming Integrated, from the Oxford American, was listed as a notable essay in Best American Essays in 2018. He also contributed a monthly column to the OA's online series, The By and By. In addition to all that, he was a BuzzFeed Emerging Writer Fellow in 2017. And he's also received support from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference as a work study scholarship recipient for fiction and for the Lambda Literary Foundation as a fiction fellow. Welcome and thank you, Fred. And you will also hear from Joy Priest, who is the author of Horsepower and the winner of the Donald Hall Prize for Poetry. She's the recipient of the 2020 Stanley Kunitz Prize, and her work has appeared or is forthcoming in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, APR, The Atlantic, Poetry Northwest, and Poets and Writers, among other publications. She's currently a doctoral student in literature and creative writing at the University of Houston. Thank you, and please welcome Toni, Frederick, and Joy, who will read for us in that order.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that great introduction, Danielle. Thanks to Guy for putting all this together. And really just thanks to everyone today for tuning in. I am going to read my essay, Pass, from the anthology. And there's a longer version of this too in my book, Carrie. Pass. After our last class, she tells me, our room for the graduate seminar is nearly windowless, cinder block, small. We sit near the corner in our ridiculous desk chair combos. After the last of her classmates say their goodbyes, we get to it. One of her undergraduate students has accused her of showing up to teach her class drunk. She's leaving the university, she says. She can't take anymore. She can't. It's a last straw sort of situation. This woman, I'll call her Marie, is one of the few students of color in our MFA program. She's a talented writer, a steady, intelligent presence in her classes. As a graduate teaching assistant, she's been bullied by some of her undergraduates in one previous class. They accused her of being incompetent. Though none were particularly specific, though none came forward to speak to her directly or to levy any direct specific charge, the department began a file. There were meetings. There was no conversation about race, about the confluence of race and gender, unless the student was the one talking. In the class this semester, though, the one containing the drunk talk student, all has been well. We're in the last week of the semester when the complaint arrives alongside the spring rain. The department will add this to her file. She may have to go on probation. Is everyone passing the class? I ask. She shakes her head. Did they ask you that? Another head shake. No one outside this small, nearly windowless cinder block room is talking about the accuser's potential motivations. No one is talking about how Marie doesn't drink. No one is talking about where we live, Arkansas, which some say is where the Midwest meets the South. I would say we're Midwestern and how we don't, as a culture, as a practice, talk straight if we talk at all. I would say we're Southern in how the last thing we're good at is holding meaningful conversations about race. When I say repeatedly, you don't even drink, Marie laughs the kind of laugh that is a last laugh, an all-finished laugh. It's so insulting, she says. I say to my student that I both know what she's going through and that I don't. You can pass, she says, nodding. From my slumped position in my desk chair combo, my head swivels, and then I nod. It's true. I'm Métis, I'm Native, but I absolutely can pass. There isn't much to say after. Outside in the dark and damp, we hug and shake off some of the seriousness, and we laugh a little because what else? I watch her turn right, and I turn left toward my car, and the rain shifts from hard, straight, and steady to intermittent, to the kind that comes toward you at all angles. I drive down MLK Jr. Boulevard toward home. This street, which borders the southern edge of campus, also is known as the Trail of Tears. The historic marker 2 blocks from my house will let you know where you are if you didn't before. It's good sometimes to be reminded, even if the reminder leaves you holding in your breath a beat too long. It's good sometimes to have the impulse toward forgetting and then to be reminded of the literal, where you are, with the past made present, with it carried and lived as you drive on home. When I was a graduate student in Texas, the first time I brought a story into workshop, a fellow student told me if I was going to, quote, write about Indians, I would need to separate my writing more from that of Louise Erdrich. Then this man misquoted from the beginning of Erdrich's novel tracks, ostensibly to show how similar it was to my story. At the end of workshop, when it was my turn to speak, I corrected his misquotation and suggested in my most polite voice that perhaps to him, Indians writing about snow all seemed the same. I assured him we were not. I assured him, though we might both have written about snow, neither of us was, quote, writing about Indians. I made 2 friends that day, a Black woman and the white Republican son of a wealthy Texas oil family. I learned fast that I would be surprised in this place by who would be good company. The class held mostly white female faces, and not one of those women looked me in the eye or spoke to me then or after. Later, more company arrived, queer writers and Latino and Chicano writers, and another Native writer. So I had far more company than did Marie, far more voices pushing alongside mine. We needed each other. Another white male student wrote as his comment on one of my poems, "Stop writing the in for the moment, but sure not to last Indian poems." What I was writing, it seemed, was considered a fad, temporary, sure not to last. I was writing my life. So I then was temporary, a fad, sure not to last. How can you stay in a place if your very existence is sure not to last? If not for my company, I might have believed him. If not for my company, I would not have stayed. It would have been a last straw moment. When a white male student in a workshop started writing stories using all of us as recognizable characters, when he made the character that was me get run over by a Ford Escort, my company took me to the bar and bought drink after drink after drink. After, they called me Ford Escort in the halls. They maybe said it too loud because the next story from this writer was a different sort of story, a domestic violence sort of story, featuring my character tied to a chair, a man holding a gun to her head. The land on which that university sits was for so many years fought over and lived on by Apache and Comanche people, who still live there, of course, just not in such numbers. We were, all of us, visitors. We were, all of us, invaders, though some more than others. Why, my friend Marcus asked in that workshop, why do you think you can do that to her? It's a character, said another white man. The writer's laugh was not believable as humor or comedy, and it went on much too long. I felt such anger, but also a little sorry for him, for how long everyone held the silence after. I've been a student or a teacher for so many years in this region we call the South. I've worked so hard to make the four walls of my classroom a place where all the Maries are welcome, where all the Marcuses know they can ask the question, where all conversations are possible, where everyone knows where we are, the limitations of it, alongside the possibilities. In my neighborhood, just off the Trail of Tears, the day after the last day of class, I walk the dogs around the block to see if we're flooding, to see whose yards or houses have taken on water. That's how I think of it now, this place, a we rather than an it. I've acclimated far enough to feel a measure of belonging. But how much of that is on account of my ability to pass? How much grace is it possible to give others when you move through the world with more than a small measure of safety, when this is safety you own but have not bought? Where my family is from, where the Métis are from in Canada, we were once known as road allowance people. Between 1885 and 1945, Métis got the name when the Canadian government decided to dissolve our land base, to sell 160 acres for $160 through scrip certificates, which were easy enough to forge or transfer, which were often forged or transferred through impersonation. If Métis sometimes could pass for white, whites sometimes could pass for Métis. They could sometimes steal our land through this passing. Without a land base, some Métis became squatters on our own land, became road allowance people. We lived in shacks made from logs or leftover lumber covered rough with tar paper. We lived like this through prairie winters. Back in my neighborhood, the water has flooded the street and the sidewalk. The dogs and I round the corner. Across the field, a crow pecks at a full, intact pineapple washed up through the drainage system and landed here at the intersection. A neighbor pushes mud from her sidewalk with a wide broom across the street and into the drainage opening by my yard. There's mud on the sidewalk, she says, shaking her head, but no word on the pineapple lying a few yards behind her. I know the South is not the only place capable of irony, capable of rough treatment, of racism, and worse. I know I have spent so much time considering the safety of my students within my classroom walls, but I have not considered enough the limitations of this place, of this South, of this history, outside my classroom walls, outside my own defining of it. I know my own passing to be a complicated crossing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. My name is Frederick McKindra, and I will be reading an excerpt from my essay submission for this collection. It's entitled "The Rich Southern History of Black College Majorettes." As a boy back in Arkansas, we called them dancing girls. The all-female dance lines that combined the energy and precision of the high-step Black college marching bands they fronted with lyrical, West African, jazz, contemporary, and hip-hop choreography. The result was almost too sexual to be looked upon straight on. I could only steal glances at the Golden Girls, the majorettes for the band at my father's alma mater, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. I wasn't old enough to be leering at grown women like that. And why else would a boy be so transfixed by the dancers? Unless, of course, he was that way. One of the boys too femme to perform an authentic Black masculinity, what folks back then called sweet. But you no longer have to be an initiate of Southern Black college culture, the kin of some insufferably proud Southwestern Athletic Conference alumni, annual attendee to a Black college classic or homecoming game, bystander at a local Juneteenth parade, nostalgist for TLC's Baby, Baby, Baby video, or NBC's A Different World, or Spike Lee's School Days, to recognize the style of dance performed by the majorettes fronting Black college bands. To distinguish these auxiliary groups from more customary majorettes, women who march before traditional white bands twirling batons, some have begun calling these dancers hip-hop majorettes. But that term is a recent invention and therefore anachronistic, a hastily applied umbrella description for a tradition of movement honed by these dance lines over the past half-century. In 2018, Houston-born pop star Beyonce mined the Black college majorette style for an iconic Coachella appearance with a phalanx of majorette-inspired dancers clearing the way for her, costumed as Nefertiti. This performance, along with an attendant Netflix concert film, Homecoming, arrived at an auspicious moment for majoretting. Advocates of this uniquely Southern performance style, a community that includes both Southern straight Black women and femme gay Black men, have been using digital media platforms throughout the 2010s to formalize and institutionalize the genre as a dance discipline. Beyonce's 2018 Coachella performance served to culminate many cultural phenomena that have helped amplify the visibility of majorette dancers, including the emergence of commercial dance through televised dance competitions, the continued popularity of dance reality programming like Lifetime's Bring It, which spawned a road tour that travels the South, and the work of amateur videographers who upload weekly game performance footage to YouTube, creating a digital archive of the dance form and making performances available for future study. The Black college majoretting style we know today began formally in the late 60s. Marching bands had long featured carnivalesque acts pulling acrobatic stunts or tossing and catching flaming batons as a part of their halftime entertainment. But dance lines enabled bands to dramatize the popular songs they were beginning to mine from the radio. As the ability to watch Black college bands was often limited to spectators attending live sporting events through the 60s, the claim made by Alcorn State University's Golden Girls to have originated contemporary Black college majorette style through a televised performance at the 1968 Orange Blossom Classic offers a tenuous origin date for today's majorettes, or a featured squad with choreographed movements to an HBCU's marching band's live tunes, as the GGs define it. HBCU marching bands across the South quickly followed suit. The Dancing Dolls of Southern University officially date back to 1969, founded by team advisor and coach Gracie Perkins and then band director Isaac Greggs. The Dolls have enjoyed national acclaim due to the annual Bayou Classic in New Orleans, one of the few HBCU football games televised nationally today. Jackson State University's J-Sets were founded in 1971, when Shirley Middleton, a former majorette and the squad's initial sponsor, petitioned for the majorettes to put their batons down. Middleton, along with JSU twirler and choreographer Hollis Pippins and eventual sponsor Nara Otis, pioneered J-setting, a style of choreography distinguished by brusque movement originating in the pelvis and the stumping of a flat foot. Traditionally, majorette fans choose between the more balletic style of the Southern University dancing dolls or the bawdier bucking of the J-sets. The dolls' style privileges fluidity in movement, a quality they describe as being poured like milk. They are famous for their port-de-bras, or arcs made through the air with graceful supported arms, slow body rolls, and struts and stand counts, 8 counts of choreography performed and repeated in the stands of a stadium, which make them look like they are prancing and can be read as prissy. If the dolls pantomime seduction, then the J-sets employ a style that is more explicit. J-sets prefer grounded, flat-footed movement. They squat or bend or buck. To buck is to aggressively thrust the pelvis forward, a movement that is obviously sexually suggestive, and in the rubric of American sexuality, deviant when cast on a feminine body. It's almost an inversion of twerking, another dance phenomenon white Americans took some time to fully metabolize. Bucking is done to the body pulsating fortissimo of a raucous brass section, the crack of a snare, or the explosive boom of a bass drum. Doing so becomes an affirmation that a receptive sexual partner can also claim pleasure by thrusting ecstatically, a rebuff against an American sexual politics that historically resigns the passive partner to demurring sex. Straight Black women and gay Black bottoms reclaim power through the movement by refuting a white puritanical dictum that bodies should not desire or enjoy the passive position, though of course it's classier than that. But majorettes achieve something beyond the merely sexual. The showmanship of dance lines owes as much to the tradition of burlesque, the art of the tease raised to the level of theater, and dance lines achieve their fullest expression when working to physically animate the band's sound, stationed to come alive like dashboard figurines to the sound at their backs, a constant reminder that the band's music is intended not only to be received, but also to animate the crowd. The audience should not only be awed by the spectacle of an auxiliary. Majorette dance lines incite the audience to move themselves. By compromising the rigidity of the marching band's militaristic precision, dance lines remind spectators that within that rigidity, there is still space for all kinds of human expression. The seductive, yes, but also the playful, the joyous, and the ecstatic. This dialectic between standing at attention or in formation and surrendering to the occasional impulse to exclaim or improvise is a hallmark of Black culture, an echo of the call and response found in its music and style. I've been watching majorette videos on YouTube since 2012. Watching these videos in adulthood made me feel proud, as someone throwing a hip to the beat of a bass drum is wont to do. Knowing that this artistry is so deeply embedded in Black American life, there was little danger of it ever being appropriated. It was mine, something of home to unwrap, no matter how far I traveled from my Southern roots. The brassy sound of the band from my computer speakers was not unlike how it felt to walk beneath the stands at a stadium for a Black college classic as a child, holding the hand of my father, my cousin Letitia, my cousin Rita. Even as a grown man, that choreography and sound gave me access to parts of myself both private and dear, Southern, Black, sissy, somebody's child. The art form is still mine, intimately so, in the way much Black art remains. It's just that now the world knows about it. Hopefully future generations will too. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just want to thank everyone behind the scenes on this festival for pioneering the virtual festival space. This is amazing. And thank you to my soror, Danielle, for hosting us, and my fellow panelists, Toni and Frederick. I'm going to jump through some sections of my essay, which in the essay, the sections are organized by these headings that look like track listings on a CD or a record. And so those track listings name the year and the popular, like the most popular songs or albums from that year in the world of my adolescence. And this essay is called I Feel Most Southern in the Hip Hop of My Adolescence, on Black Southern mobility, interregionality, and internalized misogyny. My Southernness was seeded by the matriarchs on my father's side, Black women who came up from Alabama sharecropping fields in the 20th century to do day work. The language, a euphemism for taking care of white families, a pentimento of the plantation schedule. In my own lifetime, I found affirmation of my Southern identity in the music of my adolescence, where I spent a lot of time in cars. In the aughts, Kentucky didn't have a definitive sound on mainstream radio, but Black Kentuckians heard our experiences in Southern hip hop no matter which state it came out of: Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Virginia. We didn't feel Southern rap because we were listening. We didn't feel Southern because we were listening to Southern rap. We felt Southern rap because the tempo matched the cadence of our lives and kept a record of the peripheral cultures that shaped our language and movement. 2000, Sankonia, Outcast, Danger by Mystical, produced by the Neptunes, Atlanta, New Orleans, Virginia Beach. In old Louisville, a well-preserved historic district downtown, populated exclusively by Victorian houses, 9th Street branches off from 7th Street like an empty aqueduct. From there, it begins its journey northwest toward the West End. Somebody said, the West End, the best end. By the time 9th Street makes it to Broadway, the city's major downtown thoroughfare, it has become a border with enough narrative resonance in our city to have earned a nickname, the Berlin Wall. Called such because it separates the West End economically, politically, visually, and psychically, the 9th Street divide is a common phrase uttered to tourists by downtown bartenders as a boundary not to venture beyond. Historically, it served as a divide between urban renewal projects and the business district. Currently, it corrals Black Louisvillians within 30 or so blocks, effectively cut off from the rest of the city. Its sit-down restaurants and hospitals, movie theaters and stores. 30% of West End residents do not own a vehicle, but the bus route will eventually get you to work on the other side of town. And on foot, you can get to church or the liquor store, depending on what kind of spirit you are trying to catch. Fire in your belly or fire on your head. In the first year of the new century, your slightly older teenage uncle has a 1983 Z28 Camaro T-top. It's a bucket, but you want the same car when you get older. There's a detaching face CD player and some rattle in the trunk, but the power windows won't come down, and it's burning up in the early morning heat wave. At every pothole or railroad track the radio cuts out, there's a short in the wiring, but his guy says it's not worth the cost to fix it. So he resorts to the usual, banging on the dashboard until it cuts back in. 2004, Crime Mob, The Carter, Lil Wayne, Urban Legend, T.I., Straight Outta Cashville, Young Buck, Atlanta, Nashville, New Orleans. Some of us left in the furnaces of steamboats. Some left as porters on the train. Some stayed. Some migrated north, but not far enough. If you landed in Kentucky, say from Alabama, you might have thought of it as the North before you got there, but realized it was still Dixie once you arrived. Everywhere in America, Dixie. Everywhere a running history of bondage beneath the surface of society peeking out. In the 19th century, rather than a plantation structure, the Louisville economy was organized around a bondsman system, an ironic mobility for Black folks who were rented out to various proprietors around the city for task-based jobs, rather than confined to an estate, physically speaking. In the mid-20th century, this class structure remained in place, but mobility became increasingly more restricted after 24/7 electric streetcar service ended in 1948. As Black folks bought homes, white flight commenced in the West End, and the 9th Street divide became a defining reality. To have your own car meant everything. It was a symbol of mobility and success in a southern city that did not have a mass public transportation system or an Amtrak rail to ride out of state, just a fraught inner city bus line to get you downtown to your restaurant job or assembly line. Fast forward to the aughts, and car culture was a thriving Black Southern art genre, a canvas for one's personality and style. This was one of the peripheral cultures that Southern rap preserved for us alongside our dance anthems and idioms, gold grill fronts, lunch table beats, and internalized misogynoir. The fall of her sophomore year, a girl drives her 1988 Cutlass Supreme Classic to school with just a permit, a perfectly acceptable thing to do as a 15-year-old in Kentucky. Her father's co-worker at High Tech Cutting Services has sold it to her for a charitable $500. When she drives up to Central High Magnet Career Academy, a fancy name that belies the poor state of Muhammad Ali's historically Black alma mater, she has the respect of men. They begin to invite her on exclusive dips to practice formations for cruising at the park or on Derby. In the era of Crime Mob, when even the dudes rap Princess and Diamonds verses, it is acceptable to have a girl in your crew. And as a girl, if you have something that interests boys beside your body, it saves you a lot of trouble. The body of her car is in mint condition, ox blood drip 307 V8. At post 9/11 gas prices, her entire Sonic drive-in paycheck starts going to gas. It doesn't matter as long as she can take herself wherever she wants to go and leave whenever she wants to leave, as long as she isn't the girl Young Buck raps about and Shorty Wanna Ride, trapped in some dude's fantasy, just another commodity or feature of his car. Thug Motivation 101, Young Jeezy, Savage Life, Webby, Who is Mike Jones, the People's Champ, Paul Wall, the Carter 2, Lil Wayne, the Sound of Revenge, Chamillionaire, Atlanta, Baton Rouge, Houston, New Orleans. 2005 was a definitive year. We stayed with a burnt copy of Thug Motivation 101 on repeat, and by now, some of us had managed to get 2 12s in the trunk with whatever was left over from our busboy tips and dime bag sales after helping out at home. It was the year Mike Jones gave out his number on record, the year we rapped along to Flossin' at the top of our lungs out the window. It was the year Chamillionaire gave us an anthem for racial profiling, and Webby spit every card known to man in a 16. It was the year even a white boy came with that heat, on sitting sideways, still tipping and drive slow, and had the internet going nuts before most of us even had the internet. Let's meet up on 11th Street tonight, Man yells out his window at the Marathon gas station before we get tight out of the parking lot and down 18th Street, our after-school tradition. The heat built up over the course of a day inside our air-conditioned school building. Sometimes we drive in a formation. We had the choreography down because we rode together a lot, went on dips out on the empty old roads. We knew one another's cars down to the transmission and how a certain person drove, their idiosyncrasies and inclinations towards stupidity and recklessness. We were made lion-hearted by our mobility. We were also made more vulnerable. Having a car meant more encounters with the police. And this is the last section I'll read from. 2006 to 2007, King, T.I., Port of Miami, Rick Ross, Thug Motivation 102, Young Jeezy, Dedication to Lil Wayne, Underground Kings, UGK, Throw Some D's, Rich Boys, Shoulder Lean, Young Dro, Atlanta, East Texas, New Orleans, Miami, Mobile. By 2006, we were in an era of sequels. The murder count in our city rose, and loss became so mundane as to be anticlimactic, sublimating our joy and suspicions of an elsewhere. Some encounters lasted longer than others. Sometimes we were each pulled out of our cars and questioned individually. Sometimes we asserted our rights. No, you may not search my car, but most of the time we had none. Sometimes they made us leave our means of transport behind. Sometimes we chose to leave it voluntarily while the whip was still in motion, a ritual for our ghosts to ride. One day, a girl walks out of the school building to find her parking spot empty. Weeks later, her cuddy is found in Victory Park, a Crip-heavy block in Louisville's California neighborhood. Unwilling to walk in and retrieve it, she has to wait for it to be towed. A month later, on her way home from the impound lot, the rods are knocking and the motor running hot, turning off at every light she comes to. Some young kids on a joyride must have dogged it. Eventually, it locks up right where 18th turns into Dixie Highway, the engine gone quiet, the music persisting into the warm night. She sends word to one of her boys to come get her, and he comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy, Frederick, and Toni. Those were beautiful excerpts. I admire all those pieces for various reasons, and I'm so excited and honored to get to talk to you. First, I'm kind of curious about, and to all the attendees, please type in any questions you have at any moment. I'll keep an eye out. But I was curious about the origin story of these pieces. Was there like a particular moment or like a feeling or a song or like a smell or anything? They're also like, they're all very like sensual pieces. So what is it that kind of urged you along to start? Anybody can, this is for everybody, so.
I think mine was generated out of homesickness. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I don't know exactly how I came across these YouTube videos to start, but realized over some crazy amount of time of just falling into a hole and watching them over a period of weeks that it was becoming customary for focus to shift from what had traditionally been footage of entire bands being captured by amateur videographers to just the dance lines. And so I realized that that sort of shrinking in focus was sort of similar to what would always happen to me when I would go to these games. You know, you sort of walk into the stadium, you take in the crowd, you take in all of this big sound from the band, but eventually your perspective just sort of zooms in on the dancers at the front of the video. And so just the sort of nostalgia of that feeling, which is something I tried to get at the close of the essay. Yeah.
That's wonderful. What about you, Toni? Do you have like a particular incident or memory that was like the seed of this essay?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I wrote it right after the conversation at the end of the semester with my student, who I call Marie, in the essay. I think just what happened to her, I had already written down, you know, all the things from my own grad school experiences, but I'd never thought of them. I just wrote them down. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And so, yeah, absolutely. When we had that conversation, I thought, well, what happened to me when I was in school that can be useful here, right? Like there's a way to put the two in context to show this is an everyday occurrence across universities, across the South, and really all across America probably. And so, and then as far as the place details, I'd also just moved into this neighborhood not too long before, and I was still trying to figure out how South Fayetteville would become home and what I would love about it. And I love how weird it is. I love the landscape. I love my neighbors. They're really an interesting bunch of characters. And so, yeah, so I think it was just, you know, really the proximity of all of that happening at once, but then seeing maybe the ways to tie that back to my own experiences or past experiences with Métis people too.
So you're saying that your essay kind of started with like a list of incidents or like things that happened to you in your program. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I wonder, Joy, did yours start with like a list of songs that you were making? Like how, like what came first, the playlist or the memories or masterfully
Yeah,
woven?
yeah, thank you. First, I just want to say, like, Tony, that anecdotal moment in the beginning of the essay was just so important for me to read as someone who's experienced that. And I really hope that if any like rhetoric and composition or pedagogy scholars or teachers are with us today, like they understand how important those type of things are for those pedagogy classes that you have to take when you first start teaching at the university. Those things never get addressed, and we constantly experience those things in the classroom. For me, the prompt for this essay was um, the editors asking me to write something for it, and so I really was thinking about the question: what is my definitive Southern like origin experience? You know, and I thought like, well, like my whole family's from Alabama, but that's not really my personal experience. So I remember like I knew my personal experience was like when I think like what I love about growing up in the South, it's those peripheral cultures I talk about, the language, the sound, the way we sound when we talk, um, the like all those little things I mentioned, like go grills and um, yeah, just like all those little peripheral things that
Mhm.
that I realized were all held in the music, the record of the record. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm curious about this whole collection is super stacked. In addition to y'all, you have pieces by Tiana Clark, Regina Bradley, Kiese Lehman, Minda Honey, all writers that I love, follow, and admire very much. And I'm wondering if there is anything that has surprised you um, that you've actually learned. Like the whole collection is about reckoning with home and like it's in its present form and thinking about a future, right? So, in sitting with your work and everybody else's now that it's all together, um, do you have like new feelings or thoughts about what home is or can be?
I guess a part of me feels like I'm made more curious by the collection, which is surprising to me. There were essays throughout that seemed to be interrogating cultures that I had not necessarily personally come across yet in the South. And so I'm starting to see that more and more in a lot of the literature coming out about the South and wondering like, well, where are these cultures and how do I sort of make contact with them? So one of the feelings that I came away from the collection with was one of a renewed sense of exploration. Like, oh, this is something new to go out and try and get access to and explore. That the South is the definition of the South is expanding. It seems like um, way beyond sort of the sort of intimate, sort of possessive Southern culture that I was writing from. And so I guess a part of me is just sort of excited about getting out and exploring those new communities and new cultures.
I don't actually know if this answers the question. The only essays I've had a chance to read thus far are Toni and Frederick's, and then I read Key essays. And that essay is hilarious. I just want everybody to read the essay. Like,
Yeah.
I love how he
Yeah.
uses, the idea, the phrase, like those, like he writes the story via like Southern rhetorical strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not actually true.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a conceit throughout, and the way it ends with just like, he's really been talking his shit lately, and I'm very grateful for it. So I just feel more permission from that essay.
Yeah,
Or
I felt similarly about that essay. He came here last year and yeah, he can come and talk your shit around me anytime. I love it. I absolutely love it. So I love that one too. But I felt similar to Frederick in that there were so many, it got me thinking about even just my little corner of the South here, right? Like how much diversity up in Springdale. You have the biggest Marshallese Islander population in the whole of the United States, right here, and Springdale's still the South. I mean, I know we're the northwest corner of Arkansas, but people don't know about that. It's not my place probably to be writing about that, but it is my place, since I live here, to be making sure people know that at least, right? And so, yeah, so the diversity, the complexity of who really lives here, I think that surprised me too.
We talked about this before, and maybe I should have used this to answer a question, but yeah, also Frederick's essay and like that sort of hidden like connection between queer Black men in the South, and like their role in what we think of as these more like these gendered roles, like being a majorette or being on the step team or being on the dance team. And that was really interesting to me as someone who played basketball in high school and wasn't on the step team, but loved to dance, like, and then in college pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha, and like I'm a step show champion. And so like it was really, it made me realize like, oh, like this needs an essay, like this, these like are like queer Black men that are in these spaces with us and dedicate and devote a lot of themselves to this culture.
I love that. We got a really awesome question from Audrey Evans in the audience. She says, who is your dream audience for your essay? You are all very wonderful and powerful and very appreciated, she says. So yeah, that's a cool question. Like, aside from you, who are you writing for? Who do you want to be reading you?
I guess I would say, and I have gotten some feedback from this audience, and not all of it was flattering. In fact, some of it was heavy pushback. But I was really excited to hear that they were reading and engaging the material. The audience that I wanted to really expose this essay to was the audience that the essay was attempting to describe. So I wanted to know that people who were as steeped or more steeped in the world of, SWAC culture, which is a particular HBCU athletic conference, people who were really steeped in dance lines, queer and femme Black gay men who were being sort of becoming newly visible. I wanted to know that they were seeing themselves reflected and sort of seen and acknowledged. So that was really cool for me. It was hard, the pushback, but it was really cool to know that they were sort of seeing it and engaging it and thinking about it. So that's my dream audience.
Yeah. That's awesome. Joy or Toni, you have an audience in mind or in your dreams?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely mine was young Black women in the South, and I would say femmes too, because like one of our tenets as poets is like something should change in you from the beginning of a piece to the end, or something should change in the speaker, or something should change. And as I was writing the essay, I did put together a track list, and what I realized was like every single song was by a man. Like every single song that I thought of as like my Southern identity was by a man. And so I really had to go back and do that excavation work of like, did we listen to female rappers? Like, who were they? And like, why are these not the main songs I'm thinking of? And like, a lot of them were like Northern too. Like, I love Lil' Kim's hardcore album, but I was specifically thinking about Black women in the South. And I was thinking, well, if they're invisible in this like record that I'm talking about of our cultures, then are we invisible? And so writing the essay was definitely sort of like this excavation of a Black Southern film subjectivity.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, Joy already hit on it. I would like writing program, for this particular essay, writing program administrators and people in charge of beginning level students' lives, you know, to pay attention. Grad students are a lot of labor. They do a lot of work and they should be treated better. I mean, just overall. And so, you know, to get in there and use your power a little. I would like the people who are not maybe using their power to help those students ease that transition from the work world or from the undergrad world or wherever they've coming from to being a core part of the universities that we all, you know, have gone through or work and teaching. So yeah, that's really who I was sort of writing directly toward. I don't usually have, you know, an audience particularly in mind, but I kind of did this time.
That makes me, Toni, think about the part in your essay where you say, you know, I've worked so hard to make the four walls of my classroom a place where all the Maries are welcome, where all the Marcuses know they can ask the question, where all conversations are possible. So yeah, like, so how do you do that? I mean, earlier this year, I mean, we talked about the Black at UA hashtag. I think that took off, or people were just like recounting their experiences of microaggressions and other kind of racist incidents within the classroom. What are some things that you do specifically to make sure that those kind of things that happen to you in your program do not go down?
Yeah, it's not that hard for me within the classroom structure because when I come in, we have this long conversation. We go over the syllabus, and on the syllabus, it says things like, you know, mute your cell phone, that kind of thing. And I say, you also hear the other things you have to mute or you have to put on hold, right? Like just silence it. If you're thinking, you know, that you're going to tell a Black woman that you know better about Black women and you're a white man in the class and she's written this story, mute that. And then you wait and you think about it and then you come back, right? So just that speaking over people is not always the right way to start, right? And that it's fine to sit with your discomfort in a classroom. And if someone then called you out on a thing you said, you know, it's bad to be racist, but when someone calls you a racist, you know, retreating into your hurt feelings doesn't help anybody. So we have that sort of conversation and just like how to sit with a lot of discomfort. And one of my teachers at Texas Tech would hand out a piece of candy if you were talking too much. And so you had your hard candy. And so you had to put the hard candy in your mouth and sit there till it was finished. And so I tell them that and I say, don't make me bring the hard candy. Don't be the one who talks over everybody else, you know? So yeah, so that's part of how we go about it. I just have a harder time, I guess, thinking about ways to break down the bigger structures in the university, how to make the bigger structures work. But within a classroom, you can manage it. Yeah.
Do you feel like administrators and other folks like in charge, department heads, et cetera, have been listening or taking to heart some of the things students have expressed via that hashtag and other ways most recently?
They are listening. They are listening and they're responding with words that are impressive so far. We'll see if those words shift into action. That's where in university structures and corporate structures and government, right? Like everywhere, I feel like the words can be really good, but then where are the actions?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the plan for not just an action for this moment, but the long scope of it? That's what I want to see. And in time will tell. I hope so.
I agree. And in the same vein, that makes me think of Joy's essay, and you alluded to this earlier in your previous answer, Joy, about the kind of like internalized misogyny that you say you were reckoning with towards the end. And in the essay, you know, you're kind of like, you recount these memories almost like as they happen. And in the end, you like, you know, kind of, it feels like you have this realization like, wait, hey, all the women were missing. Like, what does this mean for me and who I am and how I see myself? And then you go back and kind of do this thing of like revising those memories, which is really awesome. It feels like kind of you're experiencing your reckoning. So I would love to talk about right now in hip hop, in Black music culture. Do you think so? I mean, I think in your essay you say that, you know, 15 years ago it was really awful and we were kind of missing, or we were accessories. Do you think it's better?
So I also want to say in the space, like when I say the word misogynoir, I'm also including like Black, queer, and trans artists as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was like Big Frida was like a huge like deal. Why, like so like why was I thinking of her at first and stuff. So, um, but in regards to that, usually I'm not one for happy endings and like tying things up neatly with a bow. But I absolutely think that things have changed. Like I think Southern women rappers are literally running hip hop right now.
Like the whole industry across regions.
Like you, we can sit here and name like 30, literally. So like when I went, so I just the essay that I did for this anthology, The Bitter Southerner, published it last week or so, and they let me do a playlist alongside of it. So I got to go back and like what I did is I transitioned, my little DJ debut. I transitioned from the UGK song, which is kind of like maybe the only song on the playlist that's positive, like semi-positive towards women, into this like whole section of like women rappers all the way from 1998 when the essay starts to today.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I discovered even more female Southern rappers that are rapping right now. Like one from Kentucky, I didn't even know about, Ruby Rose. And so there are just so many that's like maybe 30 or 40 that I found. But, Megan Thee Stallion is running the game.
Mm-hmm.
We got Mulatto, we got City Girls, and just so like in Megan and Cardi's new video, they featured a few. Like there's just so many. And I really think you can't even think about hip hop right now without thinking about Southern women.
Yeah, which also makes me think about a part of Frederick's essay. And I feel like your two essays really speak to each other and like dance with each other in some really cool, complementary ways. You have a phrase, Frederick, where you say you, it's allies and femininity. And I think you're talking about femininity across all different expressions, which is really awesome. How might one or we go about creating and like living within like that kind of allyship? How do you make and
Right.
be allies to each other?
Well, what's interesting that you see about within the HBCU majorette world is that um, there is a long history of. I mentioned that the JSET choreographer, this guy Hollis Pippins, uh, there's a long history of gay men being involved in these sort of institutions, but because the South was such a gendered space, not being able to sort of be visibly active in these communities. And I think that one of the things that the community is teaching people now is that liberation struggle is intersectional, right? So if I can't expect to find my liberation as a Black gay femme man if a Black trans woman is still not acceptable, or I can't expect to find my liberation as a Black trans woman if Black women writ large are still sort of treated as an auxiliary. So one of the things that I think that community is really showing, Black folks in the South, but just Southerners in general, is that liberation is an intersectional struggle. And I think that so long as people continue to affirm that, myself as a Black gay man, how do I continue to champion the liberation of all of these people within these spaces? I think that so long as we continue to champion that, then you'll continue to see more visibility and just more allowance to exist, which I think is really powerful about what is happening within that world.
Mm-hmm. I think that is a chord that runs throughout all the essays in the collection. Is just like permission and affirmation and room to exist in all our complexity. So it's really thrilling to read. It's wonderful to have it in the world once again, a measure of belonging. You can buy a copy of this on the website of Wordsworth Bookstore, www.wordsworthbookstore.com, or your local independent shop for folks who are outside of Arkansas. Thank you very much to Joy, Frederick, and Toni for your beautiful readings. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes. And thank you to everybody who joined us.